We're about to dive into one of the most intense, powerful stories in history. It's all about making a huge, life-wrecking mistake and then finding an unbelievable amount of mercy. We're going to really get into what it means to have a contrite heart, a heart that's truly broken over what it's done, and the incredible hope that forgiveness is always, always on the table. So let's start with a big question, one that I think we've all probably wondered about at some point. How does God actually respond when we mess up? I'm not talking about a little slip-up, I mean a massive, catastrophic failure. To get to the heart of that, we're going to walk through the story of King David, a man who is called a man after God's own heart, but who fell harder and further than you can possibly imagine. So where did it all start to go wrong? Well, for King David, the road to disaster didn't begin with some big, evil scheme. Nope. It started with something way quieter, something we can all relate to, a simple moment of idleness. See, the story kicks off with what seems like a pretty small decision. It's springtime, the time when kings are supposed to be out leading their armies into battle. But David, he decides to stay home. He chose comfort over his duty, and by being exactly where he wasn't supposed to be, he basically left the door wide open for temptation to come strolling in. And there it is. He's on the roof of his palace, not much to do, and his idle eyes start to wander. This moment is such a powerful reminder that we have to guard what we let our minds focus on. They say that eyes are the windows to the soul, right? Well, David was about to let a hurricane right through that window. And this is where thought turns into action. He doesn't just look, he sends for Bathsheba. He knows she's married to one of his own soldiers, but he sleeps with her anyway. This is the moment. He deliberately stepped off God's path to chase a fleeting desire. And in doing so, he kicked off a devastating chain reaction. You know how it is, one bad choice, it never really stays just one bad choice, does it? It almost always spirals, tangling us up in this messy web of secrets and more bad choices as we desperately try to cover our tracks. Just look at how fast this thing unravels. It starts with a look, which escalates to adultery. Then, he finds out Bathsheba is pregnant, and boom, panic mode. Instead of just coming clean, he tries to trick her husband, Uriah. And when that deception fails, David arranges for Uriah, one of his most loyal, honorable men, to be killed in battle. All of it just to keep his terrible secret buried. But here's the thing. God doesn't just leave us lost in our own messes. He sent the prophet Nathan to confront the king. And this is the turning point of the whole story. The moment the truth is finally dragged into the light. Now, Nathan is incredibly wise here. He doesn't just march in and start pointing fingers. He tells David a story, a parable. He talks about a rich man who had tons of sheep, but when a guest came, he stole a poor man's single, beloved little lamb to serve for dinner. As David's listening, he gets more and more angry at this injustice, having no idea that the story is actually a mirror held up to his own face. And then Nathan drops the bombshell. After David declares that this rich man deserves to die for what he's done, Nathan looks him dead in the eye and says, "You are the man." Can you imagine that moment? All the walls David built, all the lies and secrets, they just come crashing down. The full weight of his sin, the lust, the deception, the murder, it all hits him at once. Now, to really get how huge David's response is, think about the king before him, Saul. When Saul got called out for his sin, what did he do? He made excuses, he blamed other people. But David, he does the exact opposite. He just breaks. He immediately says, "I have sinned against the Lord." No excuses, no justification. This is what a true change of heart looks like. And that honest confession, it changes everything. The whole vibe of the story shifts. We go from all this dark tension and confrontation to the beautiful, quiet hope of mercy and forgiveness. And that mercy comes fast. The very instant David confesses, Nathan delivers God's response. Forgiveness isn't delayed, it's immediate. It just goes to show you that God's compassion isn't something you have to work for or earn back. It's a gift, just waiting for a heart that's ready to be honest. So what was it that David had in that moment? He had a contrite heart. And let's be clear, this isn't about being sorry you got caught. It's a deep, gut-wrenching brokenness over at the mistake itself. It's about wanting more than just to avoid punishment. It's about wanting a clean heart, like a total spiritual factory reset. We see this so clearly in the prayer he wrote afterwards, which we now know as Psalm 51. And this, right here, is the core of the whole lesson. David realized that God doesn't want us to put on a perfect show or go through empty rituals. What he really truly wants from us is honesty. A heart that is humble, that's broken over its own failures, and is willing to just admit it needs help. That kind of offering is something God will never, ever turn away. Okay, so David is forgiven, but the story doesn't just stop there with a happily ever after. We have to look at the real-world consequences of his actions and the long journey of healing that had to happen next. This is such an important distinction to make. God's forgiveness, instant, but the natural consequences of David's choices were already in motion. His family was plunged into absolute chaos, including a heartbreaking betrayal by his own son, Absalom. It's a really sobering reminder that even when we're forgiven, our actions can still send out ripples that affect the people we love. At his lowest point, David actually had to flee his own kingdom, and he wept on the Mount of Olives. Now, fast forward 1,000 years. Jesus goes to that very same spot, and he weeps too, not for his own sin, but for the sins of the whole world. It's this incredible, profound link between David's personal sorrow and a universal story of redemption. And that brings us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? Back to that quiet moment on the rooftop. The biggest lesson from David's fall is a call for us to be spiritually watchful. We've got to stay alert, stay active in our faith, and be ready to turn away from temptation when it first whispers to us, not after it's already screaming in our ear. Just like Jesus said, our spirit might be willing, but our human nature is weak. So let's just quickly wrap up the big takeaways from David's story. First, be on guard against idleness. It can be a breeding ground for temptation. Second, God values your honesty way more than your performance of perfection. Third, and this is huge, no matter how badly you've messed up, God's forgiveness is right there waiting for you. And finally, remember that while forgiveness is a gift you receive in a moment, healing from the damage our choices cause, well, that's a journey. And all of that leaves us with one final thought to take with us. David's prayer was for a clean heart. So the question for you and me is, what does that really mean for you today in your life? What would it look like to start pursuing that kind of spiritual renewal right now?